Everyone, Chuck Morse here. Happy New Year, everyone. The Morse Force. This is live Monday through Friday around 12 noon. And you're welcome to join the conversation. You could call me at 617-396, I'll be all right, 396-4830. That number again is 617-396-4830. What is on your mind this afternoon? President Trump should sit tight and stand firm to achieve the wall, which or whatever they want to call it. They could call it a pumpkin, for all I care. We need the wall. They're talking about, well, he's not going to get Mexico to pay for it. Who cares? I don't care who pays for it. It makes sense to have a wall on the southern border. It's no different, as I've said, than a wall that any other nation, normal nation, has in order to protect its sovereign rights. It protects people. We've heard these horrible cases of children dying on the border. I'm sure there's a lot more than those. It wouldn't happen if there was a wall, because there wouldn't be a border crossing. They would be able to deal with their problems at their own home. There wouldn't be this exodus across into this country illegally. But anyway, I really want to talk today about the issue that I'm studying by reading E. Michael Jones's book, the Revolutionary Jewish Spirit, which while I completely reject his premise, he's got a lot to say here, and it's very interesting, and a lot of it is very painful for me as a Jew, and it's some things I've written about over the years. I'm at the point where he studies the phenomena of Bolshevism and the Bolshevik Revolution and the involvement in it of some very prominent Jews. Now, it is a fact of history that a fairly large number of Jews were attracted to communism, starting in the mid-19th century. I trace it back to the advent of the false messiah Shabtai Zvi, who did a great deal of damage to Judaism, who introduced a satanic element into Judaism, and who corrupted large portions of the Jewish covenant and the Jewish person, the Jewish spirit. And that this manifested itself further in the mid-19th century with the advent of the communist revolutionary, particularly in Russia and in the Pale of Settlement. That's where my own father's family, members of them became imbued by the communist revolutionary spirit. It's part of the history of my own family. I understand it. Where I draw a line with Dr. E. Michael Jones is that he contends that this is Jewish. He says this is the nature of Judaism. This idea of world conquest and the transformation of the planet into a one world collectivist ant colony. And that it is because of our search for the Messiah, our understanding of Messiah, and that is as a result of our refusal to recognize Jesus as the Messiah. I reject that. I think that the Jewish understanding of the Messiah is spiritual, that this is a corruption of that understanding among Jews, largely, and one buttressed by anti-Semites who also view Judaism as under this kind of corruption, and that the corruption basically is the communist corruption, the idea that the people themselves are the Messiah, that they can liberate and transform the planet as a collective and make this planet into this society into this new world where everyone is a bee in a beehive, everyone's de facto equal, as if this is something virtuous. I would argue that it completely runs against the Jewish spirit, which is conservative, which is ownership, which is faith in God and family and education, and which is making the world a better place by being a better person and by being spiritual and by raising the spiritual level and the spiritual functionality of the Jewish people so that we can lead by example. In a way, our vision of Messiah, frankly, is quite similar to the Catholic vision, which is very much like that. So this idea that the Jews are looking, we are as a people messianic, it's a corrupted idea that was introduced actually again by Shabtai Zvi. It was advanced, and I think that Michael Jones makes this point quite well, by Moses Hess, who was a communist of the mid-19th century, who wrote a book called Roman Jerusalem, and who believed it was a racist. He believed that the Jewish people as a race were messianic. Jews bought into this to a fairly large extent in Eastern Europe, as did non-Jews. It was called the Communist Movement. I mean, Michael Jones brushes over the advocacy of Adam Weishaupt and the Illuminati, which was a largely Christian and Catholic movement that sought the same thing, creating, overthrowing, the aristocracy, overthrowing governments, overthrowing kings, overthrowing faith, and replacing it with a one world order. So this is not unique to Jews, but it was embraced by large numbers of Jews in Eastern Europe for very unfortunate reasons, and that anti-Semites like the Nazis and others were able to label Jews as Bolshevik, too much to our detriment. And that Bolshevism itself, which launched the world's most brutal, totalitarian, bloody dictatorship that mankind had ever known up until that point. The fact that it was associated with Judaism and with Jews was very damaging to the position of Jews, the vast majority of whom were not communist. And it did contribute to the atmosphere that led to the Holocaust. I think that's a fact of history. It's an unfortunate fact. And I think that the Jewish people need to come to grips even to this day with the incredibly damaging influence that communism and Bolshevism had on us and on our people. It's what I try to do with my work. The reason we have not done that is because there are so many Jews, even to this day, who continue to embrace this perverse and poisonous philosophy and mindset, one that is atheistic, one that overthrows and upends the moral and ethical precepts of the Torah, one that rejects Jewish worship, Jewish national sovereignty in the state of Israel more frequently now, and all of the values that have made Judaism a vanguard, frankly, for Western civilization and for the establishment of Christianity and of the United States. I mean, Catholicism and Christianity, I would argue, took very much the very best elements of Judaism and furthered it for the whole world. And for that, they deserve great credit, and Jesus deserves great credit. This led to the founding of the United States. So I reject this idea that Judaism is communist. However, when I look at these chapters in Michael Jones's book, it's pretty painful to see that there were very prominent Jews in the Bolshevik movement who were communist, and some of them were the worst, and not just in Russia, but also the communist overthrow of Hungary, of Bavaria, of Germany. These movements had a pretty good percentage of people involved in them were, at least in their background, were Jews and were publicly associated in the minds of Europeans as Jews, even though I would argue that they rejected Judaism, most of them openly. They were atheist, they condemned Judaism, and they considered themselves to be and were devout communists. But nevertheless, I would suggest that the Jewish people need to take responsibility for it in the same way that I suppose you could say the German people need to and did take responsibility for Nazism. It wasn't that all Germans were Nazis, nor was it that German culture necessarily loaned itself to Nazism. But the fact remains that enough Germans embraced Nazism to allow for Hitler to come to power and create this radical leftist regime known as the Third Reich. So, again, it's painful to read this stuff. It does go to, perhaps, it fanned the flames of the type of anti-Semitism that led to the Holocaust, not just in Germany, but in Eastern European lands like Ukraine and the Baltic states, and Poland, where they had suffered under the yoke of Bolshevism, again, which was the worst regime mankind had ever produced, and that a lot of the leaders, the ringleaders in that movement, had Jewish last names. Let's just put it that way. I mean, they were Jews in name only, but some of them actually associated publicly as Jews, and they claimed they were getting vengeance for the anti-Semitism of the Tsars, which that's another subject to discuss. But the fact is that this fanned the flames of the anti-Semitism that led to the Holocaust. I would argue that there's only one man who was really responsible for the Holocaust, and that's Adolf Hitler. And he was a Christian anti-Semite. There was not Jews out to blame. But he used the kind of association between Jews and Bolsheviks to implement his agenda, which was a socialistic agenda, a left-wing agenda. And that was to steal Jewish property and expropriate it, what you call in this country, taxing the millionaires and the billionaires. And that to rally his people around a common hatred. So, it's just, again, it's a painful book to read. It's a painful subject. I reject Michael Jones's contention that Judaism itself is responsible for this. But nevertheless, we have to look at why it is that so many Jews did go into communism, why so many of them still believe in communism, and to examine that further, because they do, and that's an unfortunate fact of the situation. So those are my thoughts on the topic. I want to thank you for watching. Check out my books. They're available at Amazon.com. Chuck Morse, put my name in the server. Please subscribe to the YouTube page. The more subscriptions I can get on YouTube, eventually I could start to get revenue and I could really build a site, but I need subscribers. It's free to subscribe, costs nothing. All you need to do is click the word subscribe. If you decide you don't want to subscribe, unclick it. It's not a big deal, but I'd appreciate if you do it. And again, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great afternoon.